All right, so now I'm going to begin our second part in image kind of photo retouching and some pieces of Photoshop that allow you to take certain pieces of bad picture or pieces of good pictures, actually work on those pieces and make a good picture, a really great picture by looking at color contrast and things like red eye and things that happen in pictures naturally, artifacts, those kinds of things in pictures that you can clear out. So this is kind of more the advanced section. You've already done a couple of things with the patch tools and the healing brush tools. This tends to be more color based as we move forward through these three pieces. First, though, I do want to show you what's called Camera Raw, and it's kind of newer in the later issues of Photoshop that are coming out. It's basically a new setting on your camera, on your digital camera, that allows you to take an image and it keeps everything. It does not compress the image whatsoever. So if you've got a 10 gig camera or a 10 megapixel, I should say, camera, or a 5 megapixel camera, there is no compression when it takes that picture whatsoever. So you end up with a 5 megabyte, or even, sometimes you could get images that end up being gigabytes in memory, just based upon the size of the picture that they take. So I'm going to go into lesson 7, which is where kind of I'm grabbing these pictures from. You'll actually download the pictures you need from Edmodo. I'm going to open up this 07A start. This is a piece you won't have. If I push my mouse over it, you'll see it's a 5.93 megabyte file, a lot bigger than, say, I'm sorry, I looked at it. It's a lot smaller than these Photoshop files. But if this was a JPEG file, it would be probably a 2 megabyte file. So Camera Raw comes a little bit bigger. And again, you don't have this one image in Edmodo, but I just kind of wanted to show you what Camera Raw is. And I apologize as well because the screen isn't big enough to capture the whole window. I can go full screen if I want, but I'm going to cut back. And you'll notice here's what Camera Raw is. Here's the image that's taken. You've got all the information from the camera coming in here. And you can change this right from this panel. You've got tone, curve, detail. You can see there's a lot of stuff here that you can actually adjust. Lens correction, which is something that happens when since your lens is curled, it's a circular piece. It will actually pull up a picture in a little bit that actually you'll see how certain pillars are curled in the picture based upon the lens. I'm going to go over the basic, and you can mess around with these sliders, and just if I pull up on the exposure, you see what that does to the picture. I've got my preview section right here. You've got all these ideas that you can do. Fill light. You can use the white balance. You can say it's either daylight, which tends to put a little bit more blue in it. You could say it's cloudy, which kind of gives it a little more color. So you get the idea. Here's Camera Raw, and again, it's just there's no compression on the picture itself. The camera does not put any compression on. So basically everything the camera saw is what you're getting in the picture. Reason it's not used that often is, again, because of that size. It blows up the size of the picture. So, okay, so we're good there. Let me see if I can, I seem to be having a hard time. We're going to cancel out of that, and we're going to go back into Photoshop. One of the first things we're going to start talking about is red eye and some brightness and adjustments and contrast and that kind of thing. Let's go to Open, and you should have downloaded 7B Start from Edmodo. It's a nice picture of a mother and her son. And you've got this kind of shadowed background behind them. Obviously, the flash, very powerful when it was taken. So the flash is going to light up what's in the foreground, and the background tends to be a little bit darker. And we're going to work on the background a little bit in terms of trying to pull that up so we can see some of the detail. And what you're going to realize very quickly is these digital cameras that we're using these days are very, very, very powerful. And they take things and implant them on the picture that you may not even know are there. And just because the shadows and the highlights are huge for the people, we're going to lighten up the shadows, and you're going to actually see that the camera picked up a heck of a lot more than you think it does, just by looking at this with the human eye. All right, so first things first, we've got this picture up. We are going to go under the Image menu and into the Adjustments panel. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of adjustments we can make here. We've messed around with the invert a little bit. We've messed around with levels, but we did it with layers. Instead, we've messed around with brightness and contrast. This one I want to work with is the shadows and highlights. So I'm going to click on the shadows and highlights. You have a sub panel right here. And let's mess around with some of these adjustments and let's see what happens. I'm going to make sure I slide this over. If you don't get this panel, your panel probably looks like this. Click on the show more options and you'll get the whole entire panel. The other thing I would tell you is to make sure that the preview check is on in that panel as well. And all the preview panel does is it allows you to, whatever adjustments are made to the picture or whatever things we change within this panel actually automatically happen to the picture. The other thing you may have noticed when you pulled in the shadows and highlights panel is there's already numbers in here. And if you look at your picture already, Photoshop will kind of decide for you what kind of numbers it thinks should be in here based upon the composition of the picture. So if I cancel, you'll see the background goes back to dark. You don't have to cancel. You can keep your panel up. But watch what happens, and I just want to point this out to you because you may not have seen it when it happened. But when I pull up the shadows and highlights palette, it automatically highlighted, kind of lightened up the background. You actually start to see a little bit of the mountains and so on and so forth. Okay, so here's some numbers we're going to throw in here. In the shadows area, we're going to bump that up to 80%. And I'm going to go into tonal width, and we're going to bump that up to 65%. And you see how it blends out the colors between the foreground and the background. Radius, we are going to keep at 30. In the highlights area, and keep in mind what each of these sections does. The shadows area, I put numbers in here. It actually took the darker pieces and brightened up the darker pieces. In the highlights area, it's going to start to work with what's going on in the middle of the picture, which is the people in the foreground. So let's go 5%. We're going to keep the tonal width at 50%, and we'll keep the radius at 30 pixels. In the adjustments, we're going to take color correction, and we're going to go up to 45 on that one. And let me see here, and and that's it. I'm going to keep it just like that. So we click OK. And you already, obviously, you've seen the picture change before your eyes, but bet you didn't even realize that we had grass back here. There's some trees, a couple of rocks, and you've got some pretty rugged mountain. And again, the camera picked up on all that, which is pretty phenomenal considering that originally when we pulled the shot up, the bulk of the shot, all you could really see was the people in front. So we're good there with the adjustment. The next thing we're going to work on, if you look into the sky up here, there's something called noise. And I used a term at the very beginning of the quarter called artifacting. And that's pretty much what noise is. It's basically some discoloration in certain chunks of the picture. And we're going to kind of mess with that a little bit. So that's done in the filter menu. So I'll go to filter and I go down to noise. And let's see where we're going to go. We're going to go to the reduce noise. And it pulls up the picture of the mother and the son a little bit closer. And let's mess with, we're going to kind of change some things here. We're going to change the strength to 5. Make sure, once again, make sure your preview's on so you can actually see this in the picture. I'm going to look up here in the reds because it tends to be where most of the noise is. So we're going to bring the strength to 5. We're going to increase the preserve details to 70%. I'm typing these in, but you can drag on these sliders too if you want, but you get more granular control when you type things in. We are going to reduce color noise. Let's hit 45. We're going to keep it right there. And we're going to increase the sharpen details to 35%. And you start to see the reds are a little bit more smooth. And we're looking at there. Let's slide this over to the red a little bit. As you slide, you notice it goes back to the original picture, but the minute you let go, you see it blend right in. So this is a good way. If I click on the picture, you see all of the artifacts that are in there in the red colors over there. And then when I let go of my mouse button, they smooth right in. So that's exactly what the reduce noise filter does. Click OK, and it applies it to the whole entire picture. And we're good there. Last thing we're going to do with this one image is, as you notice, the boy's eyes, and this is a common occurrence within a lot of images, and you used to see this quite a bit in older cameras, but now with the new cameras coming out, a little bit better. You really don't see it too much, but occasionally you will. And again, with cameras being in phones and that kind of thing, you're starting to see red eye come back because the cameras and the phones tend to be a little less quality than the cameras like a regular SLR camera. So you look at the kid's eyes and you notice he's got red eye, which basically means, let me zoom in, and I want you to zoom into the kid's eyes. Basically what red eye is, in all honesty, is the back of the retina of the eye reflects the camera's flash. So you will basically see any red eye happening when the camera has a very strong flash. And that's what happened in this particular case. So the back of the eyeball, which is called the retina, here's your anatomy and physiology lesson. When the flash goes off, the back of your eyeball is so reflective to try to see. That's how you see. It reflects the light of the flash, which turns the inner part of your eye red. There you go. There's your lesson. This was so commonplace that Photoshop actually has a tool. If you go over to the healing brush tools, which again looks like the Band-Aids, you'll notice we've done 3 of these in our previous sections. The last one we haven't done is the red eye tool. So I'm going to click on the red eye tool. Looks like an eyeball with a little plus on it. Pupil size 50%, and you can mess with these depending upon how the eye looks. The darken amount, I know yours says 0. I want you to pull yours up to 10. The kid's pretty much got blue eyes, so we want to make sure we're going to fill in with a little bit closer to blue. And understand something, this is going to look a little weird when we do this because we're zoomed right in, but when you pull it back out, you'll see exactly how good this looks after we're done. Okay, and I might not be close enough here, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit more to the kid's eyes. There we go, so I can get right on the red. And I'm going to click into the red of his eye, and you see it changed slightly. There we go. Oops, a little bit too much there, so I'm going to step backward. We'll go over here, we'll change that a little bit there. That's a much better one. And one more click. And again, kind of looks funky here, but when I zoom out, and we zoom out, and you'll see the kid's eyes actually look pretty normal at 100%. All right. We have taken out red eye. We've taken out noise. We've adjusted the shadows and highlights. And the last piece we're going to do to this one image is we're going to actually sharpen. And as you notice, if you look in the lines of her hair and her ear and her jacket and even the kid's hair, it looks kind of odd, like it's really kind of blurry on the edges. So before we're done with this, we are going to actually do something called sharpening. And what sharpen does is it increases the contrast between the colors. So basically, if I looked at her jacket, I would say what it's going to do is really pull out the blues of her jacket and then really pull out the darks of the trees behind her, which will basically look like the image is a little bit sharper on the pieces. So I'm going to go to filter. I am going to go to the sharpen filter. And what am I doing? I'm going to the Smart Sharpen. Again, here's a great example of what Photoshop does. It's got amounts in here, and you notice immediately that when you pull this panel up, your preview's on, but you notice immediately it already changes. I got my mouse on the mouse button. Again, you can move the image around, but right around the edge of your head, you'll see very clearly my mouse is on the mouse button right now. And when I let go again, you see the sharpen filter really take shape right here. Let's make some fine adjustments here. We're going to reduce, looks a little too much. The downside with sharpen, quite honestly, is you could get noise again. If you really over sharpen, you're forcing the computer to put things in that aren't really there, and then you'll get noise. It kind of happened here. So we're going to slide this down to 40. You can go wrong with over sharpening, so be careful there. So I'm going to put 40% in the amount. We are going to put 5 pixels in the radius, and again, these are just adjustments here. We are going to choose remove and say lens blur, and more accurate, we are going to turn that on. So you'll notice what happened if I click and then let go. You see what the sharpening does. Click, let go, you see what the sharpening does. And I think we're good there. We say okay. It applies it to the whole entire image. Let me pull out, zoom out. And there's our picture kind of adjusted. Looks a lot better. The red eye's gone, and we can actually see the background image. Now it's actually kind of a cool picture. Make sure you save this, push this out to Edmodo. This is part 1 of your plan in this lab. We'll talk to you in a bit.